The scream sliced the silence of the cramped apartment, her body trembling as she clutched her son against her chest. The boy's small frame pressed so tightly she could feel his heartbeat hammering against her own. Sarah said, "Stay with me, don't look at him," her voice shaking as her ex-husband's fury twisted his features into something unrecognizable, his rage pouring into the room like smoke that suffocated everything it touched. Mark slammed his fist against the doorframe, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You'll regret this, Sarah, I swear you will." The words hit her like shards, but she held her ground even as her knees threatened to give way. Behind him, the dim glow of the hallway light flickered, casting broken shadows across the peeling paint, the world already collapsing around her. Her son whimpered softly, his face buried into her shirt, the innocence of childhood colliding with a storm he could not understand. Mark turned sharply, his shoes scraping against the old wood floor, the slam of the door behind him so violent that it rattled the glass in the window panes. For a moment, the apartment was alive with echoes. His rage, her fear, the sirens far in the distance, like a cruel reminder that danger could seep in even when the walls seemed strong. Sarah whispered into the boy's hair, "It's just us now, baby. Only us." And though her words were steady, her heart thrashed wildly because she knew nothing would ever be the same. The silence that followed felt heavier than the shouting. Sarah sat on the worn couch, her child still curled against her, the faint ticking of the clock drilling into the air like a reminder of time that wouldn't stop for her grief. She stroked his hair, whispering, "It's all right, you're safe here," though even she struggled to believe it. The walls of the apartment seemed to shrink, corners darkening as though absorbing the tension. A toy truck lay overturned by the rug, its wheels still spinning from the earlier chaos. Her chest ached, but she couldn't break now, not in front of him. She stared at the cracked ceiling and thought of everything she'd endured to keep them together. Tonight had shattered something fragile she'd been holding on to for years. The memory of Mark's words dug into her skin, sharp and poisonous, but she pulled her son closer, deciding that no matter what storm came next, she would fight. She whispered again, "It's just you and me. We'll get through this," her voice soft but laced with steel. The boy shifted slightly, eyes closing as exhaustion overpowered fear. In his small breath against her arm, she found the strength to keep going. The phone vibrated against the coffee table, startling her from the fragile calm. She reached for it with a trembling hand, her son asleep against her shoulder. The caller ID glared back at her with a name she didn't want to see, Mark. Her heart pounded, but she answered, voice tight. "What do you want?" His tone on the other end was cold, rehearsed, almost gleeful. "You'll hear from my lawyer soon, Sarah. You think you can keep him from me? We'll see about that." Her grip tightened around the phone, her eyes darting to her son's sleeping face. Fear mixed with anger, boiling in her chest until it felt unbearable. She wanted to scream back, but the boy stirred lightly, and she swallowed her rage. Instead, she whispered into the phone, "You're not tearing us apart." Mark laughed, sharp and cruel, before the line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than the call itself, a silence filled with the weight of the battles to come. She pressed the phone to her chest as if bracing herself for war. The next morning brought no relief, only a dull ache of dread that settled deep in her chest. Sarah sat at her friend Emily's kitchen table, the steam from untouched coffee curling into the cold morning light. Emily leaned forward, her voice calm but urgent. "You need to be ready. Mark won't stop until he gets what he wants." Sarah's fingers tapped against the mug, her face pale and tired. "I can't lose him, Emily. He's all I have." Emily reached across, her hand steady on Sarah's trembling fingers. "Then fight, Sarah. You're stronger than you think." For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to believe it, but doubt crept in like a shadow she couldn't shake. Outside, the city stirred awake, cars rushing past, lives moving forward as hers threatened to collapse. Her son's laughter from the other room pierced the heaviness, a fragile reminder of what was truly at stake. She met Emily's eyes and whispered, "Then I'll fight no matter what it takes." The words tasted bitter but strong, like steel tempered by fire. Later that day, a knock at the door sent her stomach into knots. She opened it cautiously, and there stood a man in a suit, folder in hand, eyes unreadable. "Sarah Collins?" he asked flatly. She nodded, her throat dry. He handed her a sealed envelope, the weight of it sinking into her palm like a stone. "You've been served." The words rang in her ears long after he turned away, each syllable a nail in the fragile structure of her hope. She closed the door slowly, back pressing against it as her legs threatened to give way. Her son looked up from the couch, eyes wide with curiosity. She forced a smile, hiding the dread pooling in her chest. "Just papers, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." But her hands shook as she tore the envelope open, her eyes scanning the legal jargon that confirmed her greatest fear. The custody battle had begun. The room felt smaller, colder, and she realized that the fight wasn't just against Mark, it was against a system built to question everything she had sacrificed. She clenched her jaw and whispered, "Then let's begin." The office buzzed with phones ringing and voices overlapping, but Sarah's mind felt like it was underwater, muffled and distant. She stared at her computer screen, words blurring into nonsense. Her manager's voice snapped her back, sharp and impatient. "Sarah, I need that report on my desk in 10. She blinked, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. "I'll get it done," she said quickly, forcing her voice to sound steady. But her hands trembled, the custody papers from last night still folded in her purse like a ticking bomb. She thought of her son at school, safe but unaware of the storm that loomed, and her chest tightened. The weight of working 2 jobs, keeping food on the table, and now fighting for custody pressed against her like a wall she could not climb. A colleague glanced at her with pity, whispering softly, "Row night?" She nodded faintly, unable to form words. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed too harsh, the office too small. She inhaled deeply and whispered to herself, "Focus, Sarah. You can't fall apart here." Her fingers began typing again, but every keystroke felt like a battle for control she was rapidly losing. That evening, the knock at the door rattled her nerves. Mark stood outside, his eyes cold, his stance rigid, the faint smirk on his lips more dangerous than a scream. "We need to talk," he said, pushing his way inside before she could refuse. Her son froze on the couch, clutching his toy, eyes darting between them. Sarah stood firm, though her heart thundered. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low but strong. Mark leaned closer, his words deliberate. "You think you can win this? I've got money, I've got connections. You'll never beat me." Every syllable stung, but she refused to let him see her break. "This isn't about you," she replied. "This is about him." Her son's small voice trembled from the couch. "Mom?" She turned quickly, forcing calm into her tone. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go to your room." He hesitated before slipping away, leaving them locked in silence. Mark's smirk faded, his face twisting with frustration. She stood her ground, unwilling to back down. "Get out," she said, her hands shaking at her sides. He finally turned, slamming the door, but his threat lingered in the room like smoke. The next day, Sarah sat across from Emily in the small cafe, the smell of coffee and burnt toast filling the air. Emily leaned forward, her tone firm. "There's something you need to know. I saw Mark meeting with Jenna last week." Sarah froze, her chest tightening. "Jenna?" "My friend Jenna." Emily nodded, eyes heavy with regret. "I don't know what they talked about, but it didn't look good." Sarah's stomach dropped, betrayal cutting deeper than any threat. "She was supposed to help me," she promised. Emily placed her hand gently on hers. "I think she's been feeding him information. You need to be careful." The cafe noise blurred around her, every sound distant, muffled. Sarah stared into her untouched coffee, her mind spinning. She whispered, "How could she do this?" Her throat burned with a mix of anger and grief. Emily's voice softened. "Don't let this break you. Use it. Be smarter than them." Sarah straightened slowly, her jaw tightening. For the first time, fire sparked in her eyes. If Jenna chose his side, then she'll regret it. "I won't let them destroy us." That night, Sarah tucked her son into bed, the dim glow of a nightlight softening the room. He looked up at her with wide eyes, his voice small. "Mom, is he going to take me away?" The words pierced her like a blade, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She sat beside him, brushing his hair gently. "No, sweetheart, I won't let that happen." His eyes searched hers, desperate for truth. "But he's mad, he yells a lot." She swallowed hard, her throat aching. "Sometimes people hurt others when they're hurting inside. But you are safe with me. Always." He nodded slowly, curling under the blanket, his small hands clutching his stuffed animal. Sarah leaned down, kissing his forehead, her own tears threatening to spill. "Close your eyes. Dream of something good." As his breathing steadied, she sat quietly, watching him drift away. In his peaceful face she found strength she thought she had lost. She whispered softly, "You're my reason, my everything," her voice breaking on the last word. Alone in the dim room, she held on to that fragile promise with every part of her being. The following morning, Sarah sat nervously in the waiting area of the courthouse, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of old carpet heavy in the air. Her hands clutched the stack of documents, knuckles white. A woman in a gray suit approached, clipboard in hand. "Sarah Collins?" she asked briskly. Sarah stood, her knees weak. "Yes." The woman's expression was neutral, professional, but her eyes sharp. "I'm from Child Protective Services. We'll be conducting a review of your case." The words sank into Sarah like ice. She forced herself to nod, though fear threatened to crush her chest. "Of course," she whispered. Around her, strangers bustled through the courthouse, their voices echoing against stone walls. She glanced toward the tall double doors leading into the hearing room, and felt the walls close in. This was no longer just between her and Mark. It was her, against the system itself. Her pulse quickened, and she whispered under her breath, "Stay strong, Sarah. Don't let them see you fall." She straightened her shoulders, clutching the papers tighter, stepping forward into the unknown battle ahead. The office felt colder than usual, though the hum of computers and clatter of keyboards remained the same. Sarah sat stiffly at her desk, trying to focus on the spreadsheet glowing before her. Her manager loomed nearby, his voice laced with irritation. "Your performance has slipped, Sarah. We can't afford mistakes right now." She clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around the mouse. "I'll get it done," she answered quietly, though her heart sank. The weight of the custody battle, the sleepless nights, and the endless worry bled into her work, and now even this sanctuary of stability began to crumble. Whispers carried through the cubicles, colleagues casting glances filled with both pity and judgment. Her chest tightened, panic rising, but she forced her breathing steady. She thought of her son, the reason she endured every burden, and that kept her upright. "Please," she whispered to herself, "don't let me lose everything." But the doubt in her manager's eyes lingered, a silent warning that her job, her lifeline, was slipping through her fingers. The waiting room of the Child Services office smelled of old paper and antiseptic. Sarah sat nervously, her son's small hand clasped in hers, as a social worker in neat attire called her name. "Sarah Collins, come in." Inside, the woman's desk was lined with files, her glasses perched low as she scanned documents. "We need to evaluate your ability to provide a stable home," she said, her tone professional but cold. Sarah's throat tightened. "I do everything I can for him, he's my world." The social worker barely looked up. "Emotions don't always equal stability. We'll need to confirm your financial situation, your housing, and your support network." Each word pierced like a blade, making her feel smaller, as if all her sacrifices meant nothing. Her son clutched her arm tighter, sensing her unease. She straightened her back, forcing courage. "You'll see I can give him what he needs," she said, though her voice wavered. The worker scribbled notes, the sound of the pen louder than her own heartbeat. That night, Sarah sifted through old boxes stacked in her closet, searching for documents she might need for the case. Dust clung to her fingers as she uncovered a photo album, its cover worn and faded. She opened it reluctantly, and memories spilled out like ghosts. There was her younger self, smiling beside Mark before bitterness consumed him, and pictures of her family, some smiling, some distant, all carrying secrets. Her stomach twisted as she pulled out a letter tucked between the pages. The handwriting was familiar, sharp and unyielding, her father's. The words were cold, condemning her choices, reminding her of wounds that had never healed. She pressed her hand against her mouth, trembling. "Not now," she whispered. But the past had resurfaced, whether she was ready or not. Her son's soft footsteps approached. "Mom, are you okay?" She closed the album quickly, forcing a smile. "Just old pictures, sweetheart." But her eyes betrayed the truth. The past had come back to haunt her, and it threatened everything she was fighting for. The weight of it all broke her that evening. Sitting at Emily's apartment, Sarah buried her face in her hands, tears slipping through her fingers. Emily knelt beside her, voice firm but gentle. "You can't carry this alone." Sarah shook her head, sobbing. "Everywhere I turn, it's falling apart. Work, court, even the people I thought I could trust." Emily wrapped her arms around her, grounding her against the spiral of fear. "Listen to me," Emily said. "You are stronger than this storm. You've survived worse." Sarah clung to her, the warmth of friendship giving her a brief anchor. "But what if I'm not enough for him?" she whispered. Emily pulled back, looking her in the eye. "You are, and I'll stand with you no matter what." For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to believe it, her sobs quieting into shaky breaths. She knew the fight wasn't over, but in Emily's steady embrace, she felt just enough strength to face another day. Later, back at home, Sarah stood before the cracked bathroom mirror, her reflection pale and worn, eyes red from crying. She gripped the sink tightly, her knuckles white. For a long moment, she stared at herself, the doubt etched into every line of her face. Then she whispered, "You can't break now, he needs you." She thought of her son asleep in the next room, his small hand curled around his toy, safe for now. That image became her anchor, her reason to rise again. She splashed cold water on her face, wiping away tears with the back of her sleeve. The woman staring back in the mirror wasn't just broken, she was unyielding. "You'll fight," she said firmly, her voice echoing in the tiny bathroom. The exhaustion didn't vanish, but the determination settled in her bones like steel. She drew in a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and turned toward the door. The battle wasn't over, it was only beginning. The courtroom was heavy with silence, broken only by the shuffling of papers and the gavel striking wood. Sarah sat at the table, her stomach in knots as Mark's lawyer launched accusation after accusation. Mark sat smugly beside him, his eyes cold, his smirk growing with every blow. "She is unstable, Your Honor," the lawyer said sharply. "She has financial instability, emotional instability, and cannot provide the consistency a child needs." Sarah clenched her fists beneath the table, nails cutting into her palms, but she held her head high. Her own lawyer whispered, "Stay calm, we'll counter." She looked across the room at her son, sitting quietly with a court-appointed guardian, his innocent eyes wide and uncertain. Her heart broke, but her resolve grew stronger. She whispered under her breath, "You don't get to define me." The judge's eyes scanned her intently, weighing every word, every expression. Mark leaned back confidently, certain of his victory. But Sarah refused to shrink. She would not let him strip her of her truth. The second day of hearings brought a devastating blow. Mark's attorney presented documents claiming Sarah had neglected bills and let her utilities lapse. Sarah's stomach dropped. Those late notices were from when she had been between jobs, struggling to keep food on the table. "She cannot provide a safe environment," the lawyer declared. The judge raised an eyebrow, scribbling notes. Sarah's chest burned, her mouth dry, but she forced herself to speak. "I worked 3 jobs at once to keep him safe. Those bills don't tell the story of our lives." Her voice cracked, but did not falter. The courtroom air thickened, the weight of judgment pressing down. Mark leaned forward, whispering to his lawyer, a smug satisfaction twisting his lips. Sarah gripped her papers, feeling powerless, yet deep inside, a spark of fury ignited. This was not just a fight for custody, it was a fight for truth. She stared at the judge, eyes burning with determination. "I will show you who I really am," she thought fiercely. At home, the toll showed in every corner. Bills stacked on the counter, empty fridge humming faintly. Sarah sat at the table with her head in her hand. The financial pressure felt like a vice tightening, suffocating her spirit. She whispered to herself, "How much more can I carry?" Her son wandered in, holding a crayon drawing. "I made this for you, Mom." She lifted her head, forcing a smile, her eyes wet as she accepted the paper. "It's beautiful," she said softly, pulling him into her lap. He grinned, oblivious to the storm swirling around them. For a moment, his innocence lit the room. But when he went back to his toys, Sarah stared again at the overdue notices, her chest tightening. Mark's wealth gave him weapons she couldn't match. Yet she knew love was her weapon. She whispered fiercely, "He will not win." Even with exhaustion pressing down, she began writing a plan, her determination hardening like steel. The unexpected came quietly. Sarah met Daniel at the courthouse steps, a kind-eyed man from her past. "Sarah, it's been years," he said warmly. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of comfort. They talked over coffee, his laughter a sharp contrast to the heaviness of her days. He asked gently, "How are you holding up?" She hesitated, then admitted, "I'm drowning, but I can't stop." His eyes softened with empathy. "You've always been stronger than you realize." For a moment, she felt seen, not as a struggling mother or a defendant in court, but as a woman. Their conversation stirred something she hadn't felt in years, but guilt quickly followed. She wasn't sure she had room for anyone else in her fractured life. Still, as they parted, he said, "You don't have to fight alone." His words echoed in her mind long after, offering both hope and confusion. Was love a gift or a distraction? That night, Emily's voice carried urgency. "Sarah, I heard Mark is planning something worse. He's digging deeper. He's not stopping at bills or custody." Sarah froze, gripping the phone tightly. "What do you mean?" Emily's tone wavered. "He's trying to find anything from your past, anything he can use to ruin you." Sarah's chest tightened, her mind flashing to the letter she had found, the wounds from her family, the secrets she thought buried. "He can't," she whispered, though fear gnawed at her. "If he exposes that..." She couldn't finish. Emily's voice steadied. "Then we prepare. We fight harder. Don't let him blindside you." Sarah sank onto the couch, her son asleep in the next room, the silence deafening. For the first time, she realized Mark wouldn't just fight dirty, he would tear open every scar she had ever hidden. But as tears burned her eyes, she whispered fiercely, "He won't break me." The knock at the door came like a ghost from the past. Sarah opened it to see a woman she barely recognized, her estranged sister, Laura. Her breath caught. "Laura?" The woman nodded, her expression cautious. "It's been too long." They sat at the table, tension thick as years of silence. Laura spoke first, her voice uneven. "I've been watching, Sarah. I know about the custody fight. I can help." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Why now, after all this time?" Laura's gaze dropped. "Because I can't stand by anymore. And because I know something about Mark, something he doesn't want you to know." Sarah's pulse quickened, suspicion battling hope. Could she trust this sudden reappearance, or was it another trap? Her son peeked in from the doorway, confusion written on his face. Sarah forced a small smile for him, then turned back to Laura. "If you know something, tell me everything." Her sister's eyes darkened. "It changes everything." Laura's words fell like stones. "Mark has been lying. He's hiding money, moving it through accounts in someone else's name. If the court finds out, he'll lose credibility." Sarah's breath caught, her mind racing. "How do you know this?" Laura hesitated. "Because I worked for someone who dealt with him. I saw the transfers." Sarah's head spun, half in disbelief, half in sudden hope. "You could testify?" Laura's face hardened. "Yes, but it will put me at risk." The room seemed to tilt, Sarah's trust wavering. "Why help me now?" Laura's voice cracked. Because I was wrong to leave you before. This is my chance to make it right. Sarah studied her carefully, torn between doubt and gratitude. She whispered, "If this is true, it could save us." Laura nodded grimly. "Then we have to be ready. Because once Mark knows, he'll come after us harder." Sarah paced the apartment, her mind racing. Could she really trust Laura? The wounds of the past bled fresh. Years of abandonment, words never spoken, love withheld. Yet Laura's revelation was too important to ignore. Emily called, her voice sharp with concern. "You're considering this? After everything she did to you?" Sarah gripped the phone tightly. "If she's telling the truth, this could destroy Mark's case. I can't afford not to." Emily sighed. "Just be careful. Secrets like these always come with a price." Sarah stared at her son playing quietly on the floor, innocence untouched by betrayal. She whispered, "I'll pay any price if it means keeping him safe." Her heart battled between hope and fear, but the path forward was clear. Whether Laura's return was redemption or another wound, she had to risk it. For her child, she had no choice. The tension grew as Sarah confronted Laura again. "If you're telling the truth, prove it." Laura pulled a folder from her bag, sliding it across the table. Sarah opened it, scanning bank statements, transactions, proof of secret accounts. Her breath hitched. This is real." Laura nodded. "I told you. He's been hiding everything." Sarah felt the weight of the papers in her hands, the power they represented. Yet fear gnawed at her. "If Mark finds out you gave me this..." Laura cut her off. "Then he'll come for me, but I'm ready. I owe you this." Sarah stared at her, years of anger and betrayal fighting against this fragile offering of redemption. She whispered, "If we do this, there's no turning back." Laura met her eyes steady. "Then let's not turn back." In that moment, Sarah knew the battle had entered a new dangerous phase. That night, as Sarah tucked her son into bed, the weight of Laura's revelations pressed heavy on her chest. Her son looked up sleepily, whispering, "Mom, are we gonna be okay?" Sarah brushed his hair back, her voice steady but soft. "Yes, sweetheart. No matter what, we'll be okay." When he drifted to sleep, she sat in the darkened living room, staring at the folder on the table. The evidence could save her, but it could also destroy everything if it backfired. Laura lingered quietly in the shadows, watching her with a mixture of guilt and determination. Sarah whispered to herself, "This is the turning point." The storm was far from over, but now she had a weapon. Her fear hadn't vanished, but her resolve was sharper than ever. She knew that once this evidence surfaced, Mark's facade would crack, and when it did, she would be ready to fight harder than ever before. The courtroom was electric with tension as Sarah took the stand. Every eye fixed on her, from the judge's stern gaze to Mark's piercing stare. His lawyer fired question after question, twisting her words, painting her as reckless. Sarah's throat tightened, but she breathed deeply. "I've done everything to protect my son," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. The lawyer sneered. "Even when you failed to pay bills? Even when you leaned on others?" Sarah held her ground. "Those moments don't define me. My love and commitment do." Across the room, her son sat nervously with his guardian, his wide eyes pleading silently. Sarah met his gaze and drew strength from it. Mark leaned back smugly, confident she would crack, but Sarah didn't. She clenched the edge of the witness stand and whispered to herself, "Not today." The silence stretched heavy, but in it her truth rang louder than their accusations. She wasn't just defending her rights, she was defending their bond. The tide began to turn. Sarah's lawyer rose, holding up the folder Laura had provided. "Evidence has surfaced that Mark has been hiding financial assets." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the papers were handed to the judge. Mark's face drained of color, his confident mask cracking. "This is irrelevant," his lawyer objected, but the judge silenced him with a wave. Sarah's heart pounded, watching the truth unravel in real time. Laura sat at the back of the room, her eyes steady as she watched the damage unfold. Sarah inhaled deeply, the weight of months of fear easing slightly. The judge leaned forward, his tone sharper now. "Mr. Collins, this will be investigated thoroughly." Mark shifted in his seat, jaw clenched, sweat glistening under the harsh lights. For the first time, Sarah felt the ground tilt in her favor. She gripped her lawyer's arm, whispering, "Thank you." But beneath the flicker of hope, she knew this war was not yet won. The pressure was unbearable. Back in the hallway after testimony, Sarah collapsed onto a bench, her head in her hands. Emily rushed to her side. "You did so well," she said firmly, gripping her shoulder. Sarah shook her head, tears spilling. "I felt like I was drowning in there. What if it's not enough?" Emily knelt, her voice soft. "It is. You showed them who you are." Sarah wiped her face quickly as her son approached, holding her hand tightly. "Mom, you were brave," he whispered, his innocence cutting through the fear. She pulled him into her arms, her chest heaving. "I have to be," she said, though her voice cracked. Around them the cold stone walls echoed with footsteps, but in that small circle of comfort, she found strength. Emily's steady gaze reminded her she wasn't alone. Sarah whispered, "For him, I'll keep fighting." It wasn't victory yet, but it was survival, and survival was enough to move forward. That night, sleep evaded her. Sarah stood at the window of her apartment, staring out at the city lights flickering against the dark sky. The memory of her father's letter replayed, the cutting words reminding her of a lifetime of doubt. She closed her eyes, hearing his voice telling her she would never be enough. But then another memory surfaced, her mother's soft laughter, the warmth of her embrace. It was fleeting, but it reminded her she had once known love strong enough to endure. She whispered, "You were wrong," her voice trembling but firm. Her son stirred in bed, rolling over, his soft breathing carrying into the quiet night. Sarah pressed her forehead to the cold glass and whispered, "You are my strength." She wasn't the scared girl her father's words had shaped. She was a mother fighting for her child, and she would not break. Not now, not ever. The final day of testimony was brutal. Mark's lawyer threw everything at her, accusations, twisted narratives, harsh insinuations. But Sarah held firm, her voice steady. "I have sacrificed everything for my son. He is safe, loved, and he knows he is my world." The courtroom quieted as her words hung heavy in the air. The judge leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his confidence cracking under the weight of exposure. Sarah's son smiled faintly from across the room, and she knew she had already won in the ways that mattered most. Her lawyer whispered, "That was powerful." She nodded slowly, though exhaustion weighed her down. As the session adjourned, Sarah exhaled deeply, her body trembling from the release. She whispered softly, "We're almost there," gripping her hands tightly. It wasn't over, but the end was in sight. For the first time, victory felt possible. Verdict day arrived, the air thick with anticipation. Sarah sat at the table, clutching her lawyer's hand as the judge read the decision. "Custody is awarded to Sarah Collins." The words echoed like thunder, washing over her in a flood of relief. She closed her eyes, tears falling freely. Mark's face twisted with rage, his fists clenched tightly, but he stayed silent. Her son leapt from his seat, running to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice trembling with joy. Sarah hugged him fiercely, burying her face in his hair. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but all she could hear was his small heartbeat, steady and safe. The judge banged the gavel, finalizing the decision. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah breathed deeply, her chest light. She whispered, "We made it, baby. We're free." Victory came at a cost. Back at her apartment, Sarah sat at the kitchen table surrounded by silence. The bills still piled, the exhaustion still weighed, and the scars of betrayal lingered. Her son played quietly in the corner, humming softly to himself. She smiled faintly, though her chest ached. "We won, but why does it still hurt?" she whispered. The legal victory didn't erase the pain or the years of struggle. It only gave her a chance to rebuild. She picked up one of his toys, rolling it in her palm, grounding herself in his presence. She whispered, "As long as I have you, we'll be okay." The silence was heavy. But for once it wasn't crushing. It was space to breathe, to begin again. Sarah leaned back, closing her eyes, and let the first wave of peace settle into her bones. That night, Sarah sat on her son's bed as he clutched his stuffed animal. "Mom, does this mean I never have to leave you?" he asked softly. Her chest tightened, but she smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, you're home with me." His eyes sparkled as he whispered, "Good. I don't want to go anywhere else." Sarah kissed his forehead, tears welling in her eyes. "You are my whole world." His breathing slowed as he drifted into sleep, peace finally settling over his small body. Sarah sat quietly beside him, stroking his hair, her heart full. She whispered, "You saved me as much as I saved you." The apartment was still, the weight of fear replaced by fragile hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. In the quiet after victory, Sarah faced herself. She stood before the cracked mirror, her reflection tired but different, stronger, steadier. She whispered, "You made it through." The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had trembled weeks ago. Her scars were real, but so was her resilience. She splashed water on her face, wiping away years of self-doubt. For once, she saw not just survival in her reflection, but power. Emily's words replayed in her mind. "You are stronger than this storm." Sarah believed it now. She whispered to the mirror, "I am enough." And for the first time she smiled, genuine, unforced, unmasked. The battle was behind her, but the strength she had gained would carry her forward. She was no longer just surviving. She was living. The final evening was quiet, the apartment bathed in the soft hum of the city beyond. Sarah stood in the hallway, her hand resting on her son's door, listening to his gentle breathing. She walked to the kitchen window, gazing at the skyline, glowing faintly with promise. She whispered, "We're stronger now." Sitting at the table, she allowed the silence to fill her, not with dread but with peace. She thought of the battles, the betrayals, the scars, and realized they had forged her into something unbreakable. Her son stirred in his room, and she went to sit beside him, brushing his hair back. He smiled in his sleep, and Sarah's heart swelled. "We'll never stop fighting," she whispered. The words weren't a vow of war anymore, but of resilience, of love. She leaned back, smiling for the first time in freedom. Tomorrow was uncertain, but tonight they were whole.